Hello and welcome back to Biology for Beginners. I am your host, Morgan, and today our topic is Welcome to Biology. Biology is the scientific study of life, and pretty much any child that has gone through at least American public schools can easily recognize the images of a plant cell and animal cell when they're put next to each other and the dreaded microscope from lab days. But what exactly is life? Because you can't really know what biology is until you understand what life is. Now, life is a tricky thing to put a concrete definition onto, but scientists that have been looking at this question, what is life, since people really learned how to start doing science, have pinpointed a few characterizations of living things to help us figure out what life is. The first characterization of life is that living things have some sort of regulation of their internal environment, whether this be a lizard on a rock soaking up heat or a person getting goosebumps and shivering to warm up their body when temperatures drop too low. Both of those things are helping to maintain a favorable internal condition of that organism, and this keeps living things alive. In order to be considered alive, a living thing needs to respond to external stimuli, meaning there's some sort of stimulation that triggers a response in that living thing. The example I'm providing is a Venus flytrap. And you don't necessarily think of plants as moving, but these particular plants have little receptors inside those wide mouth-like areas on them that are triggered when a fly or anything else touches them, making the flytrap close. Living things use energy, and whether it be plants gathering energy from the sun to make those sugars and then using the energy stored in those sugars for their little bodily functions, or it's energy from food, which when traced back far enough is still energy from the sun, but we will get into that in later lessons. Everything that's alive needs to use energy in some way in order to grow, develop, and survive. The next thing that living things do, if they're getting enough energy, if they're getting enough nutrients, they're going to eventually reproduce. And this reproduction can be seen when cells divide, if it's a single-celled organism, or even the cells in a greater organism that need to replenish themselves. It can also be seen in animals when they produce their young, or plants producing seeds that will eventually have the opportunity to grow into a brand new plant. These are all forms of reproduction, which is one of the fundamental characteristics of life. And once reproduction has happened, this brings us to our next point, which was also touched on a little bit when we talked about energy. Living things grow and develop, whether it's a human going from a fairly recognizable baby human to a now adult human, or a fairly dramatic life cycle like the swallowtail butterfly life cycle I have shown here. Organisms grow and develop from their very embryonic or larval stages to some sort of adult stage, and living things all develop. You can even see it in cells. A brand new cell that has just come from a division is going to be a little bit smaller than a fully adult cell that's ready to divide itself. All living things grow and develop in some way. One of the last fundamental characteristics of life is some sort of adaptation through evolution. Now, this is easy to see when you look at predators like orcas and cheetahs. Specifically, they both have colorations that help them avoid detection by their prey. Orcas have a very complex social system that has been evolved with the species over time to help them capture prey that sometimes is much larger than an individual animal. And they've also evolved to take full advantage of that underwater ecosystem in which they live. Whereas a cheetah, if you go down even to the skeletal structure, is the perfect runner. They have developed a stringy spine and claws that act as cleats, as well as a respiratory system to help them in that sprint. Now, the other example I have thrown into this slide is a fairly interesting little plant. It is called a snow plant, and it can be found in these forests that are dominated by sequoias and other pine trees where the floor doesn't get a whole lot of light. So anything living there has to either be able to photosynthesize on low light or exist as a parasite, which is what the snow plant does. Now, we will get into more adaptations in later lessons, but it is important to note that adaptation through evolution is one of the things that scientists look at when they're determining if something is living or not. Now, no matter what level biologists are looking at in their studies, life has some sort of organization, and this can be seen from top down or bottom up. The book likes to start at the broadest scope and move down. However, the way I was taught was starting at the most basic unit and moving up. So that is what we're going to do here. The most basic unit of life is going to be the cell. And then if you get enough cells with a common function or a common structure, you're going to get a tissue. When you get enough types of tissues that are working together in a specific structure for a specific function, you get an organ. When you get enough organs working together for a specific vital function, you get an organ system. When you get enough organ systems working together, you end up with an organism, which is basically an individual living thing. Now, organisms don't have to be multicellular like you and me. Organisms can be single cell like a bacteria. However, when you do have a single cell organism, you don't have tissues or organs or organ systems, you have organelles. And we will get into that in future lessons. Now, from the point of organism, you can continue moving up to the broadest scope of life. And when you move up, directly above organism, you get to the population level of organization. And a population is a group of organisms of the same species that live close enough together that they're going to interact in some way, whether that be fighting, reproduction, what have you. The important thing is they are close enough together to feasibly interact. And if you're going to move up above population, add more species in there, you get the community level. And the community level is where multiple species and multiple populations are interacting with one another. If you go past community and move in the physical environment into that equation, you get the ecosystem. So it's going to be all of the living things in that community plus the non-living factors or abiotic factors, like the rain, the minerals, the chemicals that are necessities of life. And then when you take all of that together and look at all of the ecosystems, all of the life in the planet, you get the biosphere, which is exactly that, all of the life on Earth. Now, because when you look at life, there's so much there, it's a little bit disorienting, and it can be organized from cell to biosphere. Scientists can also classify it into 3 major domains that help to break up where different types of life belong and help with deciding what's related to what. And the 3 major domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. In general, bacteria are very simple, single-celled organisms. Archaeans are also simple, single-celled organisms. However, they tend to be found in fairly extreme environments like hot springs. And eukaryotic organisms are pretty much everything else. Their cells are more complex, and these organisms can be single-celled or multicellular, which is where you're going to see plants and animals are going to be within this domain. Now, when you start looking at the domains that life can be classified into, you start getting into the realm of taxonomy. Taxonomy is the branch of biology that names and classifies species into these broader groups. And the scientists that study this particular field in biology use the fossil record and genetic analysis to determine where each and every species fits into that tree of life. And in general, the organization of this from most broad to most specific is going to be domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And these are not the only ones. There are other subgroupings at each level. Taxonomy is probably one of the most fluid and confusing branches of biology, just because as technology advances right now, it becomes a new tool to help taxonomists make their classifications more accurate and more specific. So this field especially is constantly changing as we learn more new and exciting things. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this lesson today. I hope to see you back at our next Biology for Beginners lesson. Remember, if you would like the PDF of my PowerPoint, head on over to my Patreon page where that PDF is going to be available for absolutely free. If you have more questions about the concepts that I touched on in this lesson, please remember that in further lessons, most of these will be going into far more depth. However, if you do have questions, pop them into the comments below and I will answer anything that you may be wondering. All right, I will see you all next time.
Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already done so. Also remember to follow me on all my social medias. The links are down in the description below, and check out thereptilegoth.com. If you found any value in this and you would like to support the channel, assuming you have the means to do so, go ahead and check out the Patreon. Again, that link is going to be down in the description below, just like everything else. See you next time.